Well, I don't want to be redundant with the things Russ announced, but we do have some exciting things coming up, and this is an exciting time. Um, Next week, we're going to begin our 2-week series on the dangers, the influence of false teachers. And we also start our Sunday night special next week at 6:30 in the evening. It's a special community interest kind of thing. So get the word out on that. You don't have to be a Calvary member, and you don't have to come and get baptized and join the church or anything to come to that night. So, get that word out. But hey, happy Mother's Day. We've heard it a lot this morning already, I know. And I've been reminded to let you know that we have some lovely carnations out here for all our lovely mothers. So make sure you get one of those on your way out. We've got some Mother's Day bookmarks out there for you as well. Mother's Day is a special day. And it was actually 1 year ago this weekend that I was first blessed to be able to come to Calvary Church. It was this weekend. It was Mother's Day last year. And I don't know, there may be some of you that were here that day. I know some of you were. The message was on Habakkuk and the just shall live by faith. I remember some of you remember that, but that's always a good one to recall anyway. Habakkuk 2:4, the just shall live by faith. No, we're not giving that message again today. But I am kind of going down memory lane a little. Because it's Mother's Day, not just because it was 1 year this weekend that I was blessed to be able to come out here, but on that day, I remember mentioning that that had been 1 year to the day that I was able to spend my last Mother's Day with my earthly mother, and it was an extremely tough moment. I had to go to Eastern Europe on a mission the next day. And so we both knew without saying it that it was the last time. And we had to say our goodbyes. And the only thing that allowed me to be able to walk down that hallway that last time was knowing that I would see her again. That was the only thing that gave me the strength to walk down that hallway. I would see her again. And I still know that to be true. I mention that because Mother's Day can be a bittersweet day for some people. We love our mother. You have you mothers out there, you have kind of 3 layers going, right? You think if you have your kids and maybe they're mothers now and you want to congratulate them and tell them Happy Mother's Day. And then you have yourself and your kids are telling you Happy Mother's Day. And then, of course, we all think of our own mothers, and we have different situations, of course. But for some of us, we don't have our earthly mothers with us anymore, and you're blessed if you do. But, we want to think of them, right? We want to honor their memories and honor their legacies as our mothers. And so it's not a Mother's Day sermon we're giving this morning, but it is a different kind of message. We are on a 3-week break from our study in the Gospel of John, which you've already noticed is going quite long. So we do take these breaks here and there. So this morning, if you haven't seen it in your bulletin, we're going to look at Mary. Not Mary's Jesus' mother. We would think that would be the natural one, but Mary of Bethany is who we're talking about. And it's Mary's unwavering focus. Mary's unwavering focus. And our scriptures, although we'll jump around a little bit, the 2 main scriptures we're going to have, first we'll have Luke 10, and then in the second part we'll have John 12. So there's your reference if you want them. So let's talk about Mary and her unwavering focus on this Mother's Day 2024. It's hard not to admire Mary of Bethany. Jesus blessed her for her unwavering focus on him. Her sister Martha, this day, was busy preparing a meal for 4 adults. We all know the story. Most of us are very familiar with the story, Martha and Mary. But Martha's there. She's preparing a meal, we know, for 4 adults. Jesus, Mary, their brother Lazarus, and herself. But all the while, Mary's focus remained on Jesus. Mary's attention on the Lord helped her to keep the main thing, as we sometimes say, in her relationship with Him. Life offers us choices. It does. And many times we choose not between something that's good and something that's bad. Those are easier. But we have to choose between something that's good and something that's best. Something that's best. Like Martha, we all tend at times to get distracted from seeking the best. So, how can we remain focused on Jesus? And that isn't always easy. Jesus is the best of the best. How can we remain focused on Him? Well, we'll see this morning, as we look at Luke 10, we'll see that we can do that by listening to Jesus. And then as we shift over to John 12, we'll see that we can do that by giving our best to Jesus and then seeking the approval of Jesus. So let's look right in here with Luke 10. I'm picking up in verse 38. Now it came to pass, as they went, that he entered into a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha received him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, which also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. But Martha was cumbered about with much serving, and came to him and said, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Bid her that come help me. And Jesus answered and said unto her, Martha, Martha, thou art careful and troubled about many things, but one thing is needful, and Mary hath chosen the good part, which shall not be taken away from her. So one of the unwritten rules in maintaining and actually improving relationships is listening carefully. We're not all good, we hear, but we're not always good listeners. You know, good friends become great friends when they listen to each other. Time spent together offers those opportunities to listen and to connect. Good friends know that people have meaning and they have feelings that are beyond the words that they speak. They do. But even so, we do communicate with words. So listening is vital if we want to know others well. Only after we have truly listened can we go beyond that person's words and know them on a deeper level. Now, Jesus had friends in Martha, Mary, and their brother Lazarus. And many people would come to know about these three because Jesus would later raise Lazarus from the dead. To Jesus, however, these siblings were far more than mere acquaintances. Okay? He knew them intimately. Jesus' visits in their home were always times of fellowship and friendship, and we have those kinds of experiences. As Jesus and his disciples continued traveling to Jerusalem, and that's what they were doing, they visited the house belonging to Martha, the sister of Mary, and Lazarus. Now, Bethany was a village. It was near the base of the Mount of Olives outside of Jerusalem, and it was a place of quiet solitude for Jesus. Now, Martha was one of those who believes friends don't let friends travel on an empty stomach. And we need to commend her for that, right? You can almost see and hear the dutiful Martha through Luke's simple descriptions that we just read. You can imagine her scurry of activity. Many sounds coming from Martha's pots and pans as she created a one-woman food symphony for her family and for Jesus. Nevertheless, Martha's focus may have been somewhat misplaced, although it's difficult for me to criticize Martha per se. But her sister Mary chose the quieter role. She was sitting at Jesus' feet. And that is the disciples' right place, in a learner's pose at Jesus' feet. The two sisters may have had the same parents, but they had different perspectives on how to spend their most valuable moments with Jesus. From the time Martha received Jesus into her home until he left, Mary never left her place at Jesus' feet. Mary focused all her energies on him as she sat still and she listened to his words, listening to all Jesus said. You know, the custom of sitting at the feet revealed one to be a student of the master teacher. In contrast, Martha was greeter and welcoming committee, head chef, kitchen crew, hostess, and waitress, all in one. And she made her home a dazzling display of good food and atmosphere. Jesus is the God of creation. But being a human being, he came as he's the God-man, right? So he needed to eat as well. And Martha knew this and was doing something about it. And we all can be grateful for those types of people in our lives. I'm thinking of some right now. Martha was devoted in her actions, yet in her heart we read that she was cumbered about with much serving. You see, Martha was distracted, and in our minds we can visualize her. She dragged hot, heavy pots from the oven, wondering if anyone even noticed all her hard work. She drew water from the well. Finally, she just can't handle the pressure any longer. She marches into the living room, dishcloth in hand, and wiping perspiration from her face, offered a prayer request on her own behalf. "Lord," she said, possibly with a touch of anger in her voice, "do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Bid her to come help me." Martha didn't see it, but still it was happening. Her service got in the way, as good as her service was, and it was, it got in the way of listening to Jesus. Then, in an instant, Jesus revealed that he understood both the greatest need of the moment as well as the one who had made the best use of her time. And Jesus answered and said unto her, "Martha, Martha." You know, Jesus used words of compassion and loving correction. And isn't he always like that? He's always the man of the moment. He says, "Thou art careful," fretting over details and duties of the meal. Careful. That word actually represented here in this phrase is the same word that Paul used in that famed verse 4:6 of Philippians, when he commanded the Philippians to be careful and anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving let your requests be known unto God. That's one of those memory verses many people use. But Martha's inward fretting had boiled over, making her visibly troubled. We could see it on her face. There she was, rushing about in the kitchen, preparing far too many things at the same time. And despite her anxiety and activity, only one thing was really needful: focusing on Jesus. This meant listening to him, worshiping him, and appreciating him, just to name a few. Martha, for all her good work, was too easily distracted by things they were good, but lesser importance. Serving a meal for Jesus was good, but listening to Jesus was best. So Martha, maybe some would say, made the wrong choice. Maybe it'd be better to say she didn't make the best choice. But Mary, she chose well. She has chosen that good part, Jesus said. Nothing is better than choosing to hear and heed the words of Jesus. Mary's choice kept her focus on the truth rather than on the trivial. Feeding one's soul is more important than feeding one's body. No need for complicating the moment with dirty dishes when the Lord of grace and truth had her eating from the food of his word. His word. Food served directly from his heart to hers. Just a few verses, I'm going to jump around, but just a few verses to consider. First, Mark 10. Mark 10. I'm beginning at verse 29. And Jesus answered and said, Verily I say unto you, there is no man that has left house, or brethren, or sisters, or father, or mother, or wife, or children, or lands, for my sake and the gospel's, but he shall receive 100-fold now in this time, houses and brethren and sisters and mothers and children and lands, with persecutions, and in the world to come eternal life. But many that are first shall be last, and the last first. And John 14, verse 27, peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you. Not as the world gives, give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. And then finally, John 16, verse 33. These things have I spoken unto you, that in me ye might have peace. In the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. You know, the scraps left over from Mary's delicious meal would turn up in tomorrow's trash. But Mary's choice, however, would yield benefits lasting forever. It was the choice of a higher, less common way of serving the Lord. While Martha served that wonderful feast with all its trimmings, Mary offered Christ a single serving of her unwavering focus on him. And her reward, we read, would not be taken away. In the Lord's company, seated next to Jesus and learning from him, we find the things we most need for our Christian worship and walk. We can do nothing more important until we've come into his presence. In our age of mindless activities, and we are, many of our activities we appropriately call amusements. And if you're honest, you'll have to realize that that's true. Mindless activities, amusements. We might remember, though, that in this age, no activity holds more purpose for us than in basking in Jesus' presence and listening to him. Well, let's not be naive. Simply attending church doesn't mean the same as sitting at Jesus' feet and listening to him. Perhaps the choir could have sounded better. We don't have a choir, and the music sounded great, by the way. And certainly the pastor could have preached a more effective sermon. But if we walk out of church without having heard from God, we can't blame the pastor, we can't blame the choir, and definitely we cannot blame God. We are responsible. You know, week after week, magnificent church sanctuaries around this country are filled with spiritually deaf people. Yet all of the outward things are merely that, outward things. Jesus must be primary. Yes, good Bible teaching, good sermons, God-honoring music, beautiful worship buildings, those are good things and they're important. But are we eager to hear from God? Do you have an open heart toward Jesus? You know, the contrast between Martha and Mary is stark, and it's revealing. It suggests two questions that we might ask ourselves about our devotion to Jesus. First, what distracts you from your relationship with Jesus? And that means an evaluation on your life. What distracts you? And second, how can you balance between your responsibilities, and we have those, without allowing them to distract you from listening to Jesus? Well, let's move over now to the Gospel of John. We're in the 12th chapter now. And so let's give our best to Jesus, picking up at verse 1 in John 12. Then Jesus, 6 days before the Passover, came to Bethany, where Lazarus, which had been dead, whom he raised from the dead. There they made him a supper, and Martha served. But Lazarus was one of them that sat at the table with him. Then took Mary a pound of ointment of spikenard, very costly, and anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the odor of the ointment. Jesus went back to Bethany 6 days before the Passover, meaning that the events we're talking about here likely happened on a Saturday. We know what that day is, right? The Sabbath, right? It's always, isn't it always? But at this Passover, this year, Jesus, the Lamb of God, would die on a cross as a sacrifice for the sins of the world. Now, Lazarus was there at Bethany. He's still giving testimony about Jesus having raised him from the dead. You can see John 11 on that one. But Lazarus' resurrection, in fact, kind of made him something of a celebrity. You know, wouldn't you want to go see, if you hear so-and-so was raised from the dead, you might want to go see that person and hear from him. John 12:9 says, much people of the Jews therefore knew that Jesus was there. And they came not for Jesus' sake only, but that they might see Lazarus also, whom he had raised from the dead. The supper probably was the Saturday evening meal. The hosts included Lazarus, Mary, and Martha. Martha, as usual, served. Other disciples were present as well, we know. During the meal, an extraordinary event took place. Mary took a pound of ointment of spikenard. In their measurement system, by the way, that's about 12 ounces of fragrant oil. That's a lavish amount.